Welcome to Real Scoop Live, a show for pool chemistry enthusiasts where we talk about all the coolest chemistry stuff you never knew you wanted to know. Any chemical advice or suggestions are opinion and utilized at the discretion of each individual pool operator. With that out of the way, let's start the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to season 2, not episode 2, episode 1 in season 2 of the Real Scoop Live. With me today are the usual suspects, the boys, Matt and Brett, and they're going to talk to you about fact checks, things that you thought maybe you knew but didn't know correctly about your pool. Take it away, guys.
That's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? This is probably fact check volume 1 because there's a lot of things that a lot of people believe that aren't necessarily true, right? So today we're going to start at the top of the chain and kind of go, over the course of the next couple months, we'll throw it fact checks in each one of our episodes. Maybe we'll do a special on a whole bunch of them, depending on who sends in the ones that they want us to fact check on. But today we have 3 or 4 of them that we're going to talk about, depending on time. So hopefully, if you're there watching, because I see a few of you there, you can throw it in the chat and say, "Hey, what's going on here or there," and we can go from that.
Before we jump into the first one, I want to mention something that I saw this morning on one of the pool homeowner groups. These are very interesting and rage-inducing things for pool professionals. So if you ever want to just rage out and scream at your phone or computer, sign up for those groups because some of the things that they say in there will blow your hair back. The best one I saw probably ever was this morning. My pH is at 7.3. What should I add to my pool to get it to 7.9? The perfect range.
What is the perfect range, Brett?
They were at it. They were there. 7.3 to 7.5, living pretty. And they're shooting to get to 7.9, which makes their chlorine less effective and a myriad of other issues potentially. That's kind of what started this. We wanted to talk about some of the goofy stuff we've been hearing and seeing out in the field. Matt, what do you got? You're about to say something.
Well, I was going to say that depending on the region of the country that you're in, you can have a preferred range of anywhere between 7.2 and 7.8. But the perfect is 7.5, but 7.2 to 7.6 is acceptable all across the country. So,
and why would you say 7.5 would be perfect?
Because the average pH of humans' eyeballs and all the mucus linings and everything that come in contact with water is 7.5. So you could say something like, everybody's temperature is 98.6. Not everyone's temperature is 98.6, but that's the median, right? So 7.5 is the median for the mucous membrane. So if you have your pH at 7.5, a couple things happen. Number one, you can ensure bather comfort as long as the chlorine's not like crazy high. But then you can also ensure the effectiveness of the chlorine because the higher your pH gets, the less effective your chlorine is. The lower the pH gets, the less life your chlorine has. So the 7.5 is right about where you want it.
For those of you that are unaware, Matt is actually a bird, and he is talking through a translator. So if you hear the tweeting in the background, that is his native tongue.
Birds aren't real. Birds aren't real.
Apparently, right? They aren't real.
At least that's what my older boys say. They all have shirts that say birds aren't real.
Matt has a bird, and he likes to chime in. So we like to make sure people realize that he's...
Hey, man, the Father's Day episode's been over for a while now, Brent. So I don't know if everybody has seen that or not, but if you go to our YouTube page and look up RSL, we did a Father's Day tribute, which is all it was like 20 minutes or so of dad jokes. So if you need a laugh, if you're feeling depressed, or if you just want to laugh at dumb jokes and dumb facial expressions,
we got you covered.
To watch. Yeah. And you know what? It was pretty popular. So, all right. So let's get into fact check volume 1. Okay. Yep. These are curated from our CET team, which is our customer experience team, from the outreach that we do, and from people calling in. These are the ones that we found this year have tended to be the most popular questions. And so we'll go from one to another. We'll kind of switch back and forth. But the first one is that all green pools mean you have algae. Is that true? True or false, Brett?
false.
False. How is that false? I thought green pools meant green algae.
Because algae is not the only thing that's green that could potentially be in your pool. Our favorite monstrous-sized lady, the Statue of Liberty, she's a nice, pretty patina green, isn't she?
Oh, could be. I wonder why that is.
She's made out of copper.
Oh, okay.
And copper, when it oxidizes, actually turns a shade of green. Oh my.
Okay, so we're kind of playing around just because we have these kind of conversations with people all the time. But if you are working at a pool retail store, or if you're taking calls for a service company, and someone calls you and says, "My water's green. What do I do? What do I need to get?" The overwhelming majority of people in the industry will say, "Oh, well, you need some chlorine and some algicide," because they're assuming that it is an algae problem. But the fact of the matter is that not all green pools mean algae. So the proper question, if someone says, "I have a green pool," the proper question is to say, "What kind of green?" And I think most homeowners will say, "What do you mean, what kind of green?" Well, you could literally say, "Well, is it grass green or is it Mountain Dew green?" Because grass green will say algae and Mountain Dew green will say copper. And the problem is that if you treat copper like you would algae, or algae like you would copper, neither one of them are going to work, and you're going to look like a jerk. So you need to make sure to know which one it is in order to treat it properly.
And a copper pool that has green coloring in it, a lot of times you'll actually still have pretty good clarity where you can see through it. It's just discolored, strange, off-putting green colored water. Whereas algae outbreaks, a lot of times you'll get turbidity. You can't see the bottom. It's like, man, I thought I had more than one step on this pool. That's the kind of thing you'll see a lot more with algae than you will with metals. If you've got metals so bad that you are having clarity issues, I'm sorry.
That's something else. That's not the chemistry issue. That's more of a hydraulics and filtration issue.
Yep.
But let's go one step further. Once you know that it's grass green, and so you have said, okay, well then we know that it's 99.9% it's going to be an algae issue. The question then is to say, well, how bad is it? Can you see the top step? Can you see the shallow end? Can you see the main drain? Because if you can't see the main drain, but you treat it with a normal amount of shock, again, it's not going to work, right? You're not going to get rid of all the algae. And then the people are going to say, "Oh, well, I went to this person, I called that person, and I put in what they said and it didn't work." And, next thing you know, they're dragging your name through the social media mud pit, right?
Yeah,
so,
now you're the bad guy.
Yeah, because they spent $25, $30 and it doesn't work. They're like, well, they don't know what they're talking about there.
So on the inverse of this one, if we're looking at the next one, if you don't add enough, that could be a problem. So more's always got to be better, right?
Perfect segue, Brett. So when you're talking about a lot of shock products, that's true, but it all depends on what shock product you're using. Without going down the crazy rabbit hole, which we are trying to keep these to like 15 to 20 minutes.
Fingers and toes.
But we have talked about this very thing for upwards of an hour and more on multiple occasions. Brett and I have. I will tell you that if you're using liquid chlorine or cal hypo, for the most part, it's fine to use as much as you want. And the more you use, the better it's gonna work, right? Because if you're trying to reach breakpoint chlorination, say, and you need to get to 20 parts per million, and you only put enough chlorine in to get to 19 parts per million, you're making your issue worse. In other words, now you have to use even more shock to get rid of it. The pool's going to stink even more of chloramines. And so using more of the non-stabilized shock, so cal hypo and liquid chlorine, tends to be fine, if you want to do that. Using products like Revive, and specifically Revive, the more you put in, the more contaminants it takes out. So that's fine too. But pretty much every other product you don't want to put in however much you decide. Specifically clarifiers, because the clarifiers that a lot of people buy, the cheaper versions, essentially what those are is a bottle of positive charges. Everything that hangs around in the pools is negatively charged. Every organic is negatively charged. So when you put a bottle of clarifier in, or the proper amount, which typically is an ounce per 5,000 gallons, essentially what happens is that the clarifier puts in positive charges, they hook up with the negative charges, which then coagulates everything so the filter can filter it out. Perfect. But you know how we are. we are meaning men maybe, or Americans, is that
Interman logic.
we always think that, hey, if I'm putting in, say, 3 ounces out of a 32-ounce bottle, and that's supposed to clear my pool, me personally, I'm thinking 3 ounces in 15,000 gallons. That's
I
not
bet you I need
anything.
at least half that bottle.
I'm going to put in half the bottle.
Yeah.
Well, with Revive, that's no big deal. But with a clarifier that's a blue-colored or a green-colored clarifier, you put that in, and essentially what that does is all those positive charges create a dispersant rather than a coagulant. So the positive charges keep all the negatives apart, keep all the positives apart. And so now instead of a negative cloud, which you can counteract or counterbalance, you have a positive cloud, which you can't counterbalance. And so if someone says to you, well, I've been using the clarifier you sold me and my water's still cloudy, there's only 2 things that can happen. Number 1, well, 3 things. The water could be out of balance. They put in too much clarifier, or there's something wrong with the filtration system, right? If they follow the directions on the clarifier, then likely that's not going to happen unless there's a filter issue.
That could be something as simple as their pool's cloudy, so they think, well, I'm going to backwash every day, maybe a couple times a day, because that'll make my filter run better. Mm-hmm. Filters actually run more effectively and filter more stuff out when they're a little bit dirty. It's just like your furnace filter. It's filtering more stuff out when you've got stuff caked on there. The downside is it's making it's adding a very thin film of very fine particles to your filter media, which is great because it means you're filtering more. The downside is it means your pump has to work a little bit harder to push all that water through there. So that's why you kind of have to have that happy medium. So a lot of times if your water's cloudy and everything else is as it should be, don't backwash for 5-6 days. And a lot of times that's enough to bring it back and not have to do really anything else.
So let's go one step further, because when you're working at a store or giving advice to homeowners who don't know these kinds of things, you really should only clean your filter when the pressure goes up between 5 and 7 psi. Mm-hmm. So in order to find out where you start from, you need to clean the filter or put in a new cartridge or whatever. You look at what the pressure is once everything is going, and you count 5 higher than that, and you put a little mark with like a Sharpie or something.
Yep.
So you know that when that pressure gauge gets to that mark, that's when you need to clean it. Anytime you start from the clean and get to the dirty, anywhere within there, the higher it gets or the closer it gets to that mark, the better it's filtering. So you don't want to mess that up. You want to let it filter and get the smaller particles. That way your water looks better.
And if you backwash before you hit the point where it can't, before the point Matt was talking about, you're throwing away water, you're throwing away chemicals, you're throwing away the heat from your heater that you put in there, and just wasting a lot when you don't need to. And ultimately, you could be making things run less effectively by doing that too often. Especially if you fill with well water, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to backwash all the time if you're filling with well water, because you don't know everything that's in that. Well, you might know what's in there.
Well, you might know what's in there, and you might not want to swim in it. Who knows, right? So,
why does your pool smell like rotten eggs, Cindy? Well, we've got a sulfur problem.
Yeah, and the bad thing about the sulfur problem, besides the rotten egg smell, is that oxidized sulfur actually turns a very dark brown that can be construed as black. So if you get too much sulfur in the water, and then you shock it with too much chlorine, or if your pH goes up, then that actually comes out of solution and causes a black pool situation.
And brown and black pools are not very inviting.
Mm-hmm. Especially ones that smell like rotten eggs. You might as well just move.
Other questions come up when you have a pool that looks and smells like that, and it's just an uncomfortable situation.
So that kind of leads into another fact check or another fallacy that's out there, and that is we're going to go to the grown-ups section. So Stacy, for context, why don't you tell us about this Airbnb that you were at last week?
Yeah. So I was on vacation last week, and we rented an Airbnb, and they had a saltwater pool, and they were selling the saltwater pool as like the most luxurious amenity that they had. So, working here, I realized it's really not a whole lot different than having a regular pool, but neither here nor there. So we go out to the pool, and there's a sign hanging that says something along the lines of encourage your little ones to get out of the pool and not to pee in the pool, because if they do, the urine will have some sort of chemical reaction or effect with the salt cell generator, and in turn turn the water green. So I'm with my sister and her family, and she's like, is that a thing? Like they were so intrigued by that. So no one peed in the pool, so we couldn't confirm or deny if that worked.
Yeah. As far as we know, no one peed in the pool.
You know what happens is that when the kids hear something like that, they go in there and they put a little bit of psst in there just to see if it changes colors. So they go, oh, no change, and then they go anyway. We have another colleague of ours that had 15, 14-year-olds in his pool for 3 hours without any one of them having to get out to go urinate during this whole pool party they were having. And he was like, yeah, you know
it's happening.
Yeah.
There's a term for it. Swim teams, swimmer's delight. It's amazing how if you ever have to lifeguard a swim team practice that's like 6 hours, how they never get out and go to the restroom.
Okay, so how can this? I mean, this is a fact check episode, right? So I will say that based on what Stacy said, and based on the fact that I saw the movie Grown Ups, where Kevin, what's his name? Kevin's not Smith. What's his name? The big guy on Grown Ups. He's a comedian. He's the Queen of New York or whatever. What's his name?
Paul
King
Blart?
of Queens? No, King of Queens.
Yeah, it's Paul Blart,
Yeah.
Kevin James.
Yeah.
James.
Kevin James. Okay, so in the movie, Kevin James is in this pool, and his daughter goes, "Daddy, are you peeing?" And he goes, "No." And you see this big blue cloud come out from away, and everyone's like, "Ow, ow!" It's kind of like if you're old like me, you remember Caddyshack. You know, when the dude threw the Snickers in the pool, and everyone thought it was Duty, right? So is that true? Hey, if you haven't seen that, Caddyshack is a classic.
It holds up.
From the 70s. My brothers told me about it. You know, I didn't see it. I wasn't there. But no, he's kidding.
Too young. They wouldn't let me in.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me in. Anyway, so Brett, let's fact check that. Is there such a thing that you can put in the pool that will show urine?
PPC?
Yep.
There is no PPC product that exists out there that if somebody urinates into a pool will change the pool colors.
And so the PPC that you're saying is PP.
Comma C. Yeah, SEE.
Yeah, PPC.
Right. And the reason why that chemically they could probably make something that would do that, but the reason why is human waste, regardless of its sweat, pee, poo, other forms of waste, it shares a lot of commonalities in what it's made up of. It's just different concentrations. So it might sound gross to hear, but a lot of what comes out of you as urine actually comes out of your sweat glands as sweat. It's just different concentrations. So obviously it's going to be a lot more concentrated as pee because it's had time to cook in your body and get filtered out and waste and all that than sweating. But it would still, if there was a product that would give you kind of like a blue color around you if you peed in the water, you actually sweat quite a bit when you're swimming because it's good exercise. You would have like a blue cloud like surrounding, like an
trailing
aura
behind you. Yeah,
a body waste aura of blue surrounding your whole body while you're actually in the pool. And then you'd have that monster cloud if you ever did, unleash the fury. That's why it wouldn't work out that well. But if you do want to fool someone into thinking that there is a product like that, they do make just dyes that you could sneak or hide. Men's swimsuits leave a little bit more room for shenanigans. You could hide a small bottle in your pocket of blue pool dye.
No. You can do the phenol red, the cheap $1.25 little phenol red that you can get in a rainbow.
We're not advising anybody to do this. We're just hypothetically putting out there that this is something that nut jobs could do if they want to play around.
Well, I mean, here's one thing though. If you use phenol red, not only does it cost less, but you can also tell what the pH of the pool is, and if it's acidic, then the phenol red would come out yellow. So
got to throw a little science in on the
right.
On the pee joke.
So the other part of it too is that remember that you're sweating from your pores, right, from all of your body, where urine comes out in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a concentration of it going through here as opposed to coming out. And wasn't Mike just saying the other day that it was like it's 2 pints an hour for an active swimmer in the summer?
Something along those lines.
Something along those lines.
Water temperature plays a factor too.
Right. Water temperature and activity. So So that's why there really isn't one like that. So, obviously Grown Ups wasn't exactly nonfiction
Factual.
or anything, but that's one of those things. So fact check: is there something that shows urine detection in the water? No. All right. So then let's go to the last thing. Okay. The last thing we want to cover today is you can only shock with chlorine. So there is a lot of people that think that the only way to shock a pool is with a chlorinated product. There are lots of different chlorinated products, and it all depends on where you buy your chlorinated products and what the marketing team behind that product says on the package. So what I'm saying is that there are some blends or styles of shock that are available at big box stores that aren't necessarily, well, they really aren't. I won't say this. That aren't as strong as the stuff you can get at a
Specialty
proper
pool retailer.
specialty pool retail store, and it's like that for a reason. There's class 1 and class 3 oxidizers. Some are more reactionary, some are less reactionary. The less reactionary ones are being able to be sold at big box stores, where the more reactionary ones are able to be sold at specialty stores. But the other part of it too is that there are companies out there that consider, or that they market dichlor as a shock. But we know in the industry that dichlor is actually a booster, right? So in order to get enough dichlor into a pool to have a proper shock, you have to use multiple bags instead of one bag of cal hypo per 10,000 gallons or 1 gallon of liquid chlorine per 10,000 gallons. You'd actually have to use.
And you're also greatly ramping
five or
up
6 or 7. Yeah.
Greatly ramping up the amount of cyanuric acid stabilizer when you add it, because it's something like 40% of dichlor is actually cyanuric acid.
Yeah. And this is one of those things that we can actually go down the rabbit hole like crazy, but because it involves breakpoint chlorination, and it involves the amount of your contaminant load, the bather load, how well your hydraulics are as to how much you need, and we're not going to do all that. Basically, what we're saying is,
because we're doing that next week.
Yes. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, show up next week. We'll be here. But in actuality, there are other products that are on the market that you can actually shock the pool without having to reach breakpoint chlorination or even using chlorine. So if you have customers, or if you are a consumer that happened to stumble upon this episode, know that there are oxygen-based shocks that are out there, because we're talking about a shock is actually a term for oxidizing the pool, and oxidizing the pool gets rid of contaminants that have been sanitized by other products. So like chlorine and bromine are sanitizers; those kill the germs, but the germs hang out in the water. They're now inert, but they're still in the water. So you need a high enough something, whether it's chlorine based or oxygen based, to turn that combined chlorine into gas, and that's what we're talking about. So with chlorine, you have to get enough chlorine in the water in order to make that reaction happen. With other products, you can use that just by virtue of using active oxygen. So things like OxySplash, Easy Pool, Pepper, Easy Spa, or even a traditional non-chlorine shock. What those will do is those will actually oxidize out those inert contaminants without having to reach breakpoint chlorination. So a lot of people that say, I'm allergic to chlorine, I don't like chlorine, I don't want my kids to swim in chlorine, chlorine's bad for the environment, whatever. You don't have to put a ton of chlorine in to take care of your pool. You can actually use an oxygen-based product, right? So you don't need chlorine to shock a pool.
I'm surprised you didn't lean into the mob boss example of when you're killing pathogens in the water, and then what do you do with the body? You got to break it down.
You got to break it down.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey man, we're right in the middle of Better Call Saul, and I'm a big Breaking Bad fan. So I know in one of the early seasons they talk all about that. And if you have not watched that, and you probably have seen Pulp Fiction, same kind of thing happens. Not to get gross, just context. So you got to break down that body. So body of germs,
kill something in the
whatever.
pool. You got to do something with the body.
Yeah. Well, we actually took kind of a morbid tone there, but anyway.
A little bit.
So we talked about just to change the subject, please hurry.
Yeah.
We talked about how all green pools are not algae; they can be algae or copper for the most part. The more the better. In certain very small percentage of products, that's true, but most products it's not true. Specifically, clarifiers they actually become a dispersant, not a coagulant. We talked about urine and sweat and how you can tell that people are urinating or sweating in your pool. You can't. just think that they are, even though everyone says that they're not. And what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is, and we covered this last year or last season. We did an episode called ammonia nitrates. When people are putting in organic waste via urine, sweat, or whatever, right? We don't want to talk about the other things they could do, or it may be inadvertently, right? Because you could be working in the yard, mowing or whatever, and hot and sweaty, and you want to cool off, so you jump into the pool, or you have someone that's mowing your lawn and maybe they fall into the pool because they're hot. All the stuff that's on you at the time washes off into the pool. And without getting even worse, think about it that when you're swimming, your pores open up. So the stuff that's stuck in your skin, like body oils, soap, shampoo, whatever, that goes into the pool, but also everybody else's does too. So when your pores are open, it can also suck in stuff from the pool into your pores. And when you get out, your pores close. And so essentially you're swimming with, you carry some of your friends with you, I think is what Brett says, right? When you get out of a pool.
That's a wholesome way to put it.
Yeah. So organic waste is not. Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
Father's Day is not over.
So in other words, there's really not a way to tell how much organic waste is in the water. You just pretty much guess that there is organic waste in the water. So that's why the segue is then to shocking, right? When you oxidize your pool, you help to get rid of the contaminant load so that when you go in, you're not absorbing all this stuff that everybody else has now washed in there. So you don't have to use chlorine. You can. Chlorine is the most readily available for the most part, maybe not this year, but is typically the most readily available. But if you don't want to use chlorine for whatever reason, or you don't want to have to worry about figuring out exactly how much to put in, you can use an oxygen-based or a non-chlorine-based shock, a lot like OxySplash. Okay. So those are the 4 fact checks that we had for today. I hope you found this interesting. We appreciate
we had fun.
Put the comment in. Yeah, we had fun with it. The next episode we're going to cover is shock is a verb, and so we're going to talk about shocking and why you need it. And so we're coming, a little bit more than what we talked about today. But if you have any questions, comments, or if you want us to talk about anything in particular on an upcoming episode of RSL, please let us know. You can comment on this video. Thanks for joining us live. This is the first one that we've actually done live. So although we call ourselves Real Scoop Live, we're live when we're talking to each other, but not live for everybody else. So we appreciate you joining us.
We're generally alive. So.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Yeah. So I will turn the time over to Brett or Stacy if you guys want to say anything else. Remember to like, subscribe, share, anything that you can do to help us out. We really appreciate it. But again, we're not going to hold you to it. So do your thing.
That's all I've got.
Here comes the outro music.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for joining us today.